The crack of a whip sliced through the early morning air, jolting Josephine Evans awake with a start, her wrists raw against the bindings that secured her to the wagon. The year was 1875, and like so many desperate souls before her, she had become merchandise in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Montana Territory. "Rise and shine, Miss Evans," drawled the trader, a man known only as Howell. "Today's your lucky day. Hill City awaits, and with it your new master." Josephine flinched at the word master. Just 3 weeks ago, she had been the eldest daughter of a respected Boston merchant. Now, after her father's sudden death had revealed a mountain of gambling debts, she found herself bound by a contract signed by her uncle, a contract that had sold her services for 5 years to pay those debts. "I'm not cattle," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Howell laughed, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "In these parts, Miss Evans, everything has a price, even Boston ladies with fancy educations." The wagon lurched forward, beginning the final leg of their journey. Josephine closed her eyes against the bright morning sun, remembering the humiliation of being displayed before potential buyers in the last 2 towns. No one had met her uncle's asking price until now, apparently. Hill City materialized on the horizon by midday, a bustling mining town nestled in a valley, with mountains rising majestically in the distance. The main street teemed with activity, miners fresh from their claims, merchants hawking wares, and ladies of questionable virtue calling from balconies. "Remember," Howell muttered as he helped her down from the wagon, "you try to run, and the law's on my side. That contract's ironclad." The auction house stood at the far end of the street, a weathered building with a sign that euphemistically read "Labor Exchange." Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the stench of unwashed bodies. 3 other women stood in line ahead of Josephine, their faces blank with resignation. "Gentlemen," called the auctioneer, a portly man with a silk vest stretched tight across his belly. "Our next lot comes all the way from Boston society. Educated, literate, and guaranteed untouched. Imagine the prestige of having a genuine lady tending your home." Josephine felt the heat of shame creeping up her neck as men appraised her like a mare at market. Her blue dress, once fashionable in Boston parlors, now felt like a costume in this rough-hewn world. The bidding began at $50. Voices called out from the crowd, raising the price steadily. At $120, a burly man with a red beard seemed poised to win her contract. Josephine's heart sank as she observed his cruel eyes and meaty hands. $200. The voice came from the back of the room, deep, steady, and authoritative. The crowd parted to reveal a tall figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. $200 from the newcomer," the auctioneer announced gleefully. "Do I hear 220? The red-bearded man scowled but remained silent. No one else spoke. Sold to the gentleman in the doorway. As the crowd dispersed, Josephine got her first clear look at her purchaser. He stood over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. Dark hair fell just past his collar, and a week's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, piercing blue, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Name's Samuel Ryder," he said, approaching the auctioneer's desk to complete the transaction. "I'll take her papers now." The auctioneer produced the contract, a document several pages long that detailed Josephine's obligation to serve for 5 years in whatever capacity her owner deemed appropriate. Samuel scanned it briefly, his expression unreadable. "Miss Evans," he said, turning to her, "gather your belongings. We're leaving." She had only one small trunk, containing the pitiful remains of her former life: a few dresses, a hairbrush, a locket with her parents' portraits, and a well-worn copy of Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Samuel lifted it effortlessly and gestured toward the door. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty street. Samuel led her to a handsome bay horse tethered near the boardwalk. "Can you ride?" he asked, securing her trunk to the saddle. "Yes," she answered, lifting her chin slightly. "My father insisted I learn." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Good. We've got a fair distance to cover before nightfall." He helped her mount, then swung up behind her with practiced ease. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, and Josephine stiffened at the unfamiliar proximity. "Relax, Miss Evans," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "I don't bite." They rode in silence through town, past curious onlookers and out onto the open trail. Only when the buildings of Hill City had disappeared behind them did Samuel speak again. "I imagine you have questions." "Several," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Beginning with where you're taking me and what you expect from your investment. My ranch lies about 10 miles southeast of town. As for expectations—" He paused, then reached into his vest pocket, retrieving the folded contract. With deliberate movements, he tore it in half, then quarters, then eighths, letting the pieces scatter in the wind. Josephine watched in disbelief as the document that had controlled her fate fluttered away like autumn leaves. "I don't believe in indentured service, Miss Evans," Samuel said quietly. "No human being should own another." "Then why?" she whispered, turning slightly to see his face. "Why spend $200 on me?" His eyes met hers, solemn and direct. "Because that red-bearded fellow is Elias Munson. He owns the largest brothel in Montana Territory, and he wasn't looking for a housekeeper." A chill ran through Josephine despite the warm evening air. "So you rescued me. Let's just say I recognized an injustice and had the means to address it." He adjusted the reins in his hands. "You're free to go wherever you please, though I'll mention that Boston is a mighty long journey from here. I'm offering you honest work at my ranch, cooking, cleaning, helping with accounts, room, board, and fair wages. Your choice." Josephine considered her options, which were painfully few. She had no money, no connections west of the Mississippi, and a very limited understanding of frontier life. "I accept your offer, Mr. Ryder," she said finally. "And thank you." He nodded once, and they continued riding as the sun began to set, painting the vast Montana sky in breathtaking hues of orange and purple. For the first time since her father's death, Josephine felt a flicker of hope. The ranch appeared as twilight deepened, a substantial main house built of timber and stone, a large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Lanterns glowed in windows, creating a welcoming tableau against the darkening landscape. "Ryder's Rest," Samuel said as they approached. "Not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's mine. Built it from nothing 5 years ago." A weathered man in his 60s emerged from the barn as they rode in. "Was beginning to think the wolves got you, boss," he called, then stopped short when he noticed Josephine. "This is Miss Evans," Samuel explained as he dismounted, then helped her down. "She'll be staying with us, helping around the house. Miss Evans, meet Walter Gibson, my foreman and the best horseman this side of the Rockies." Walter touched his hat respectfully. "Madam." "I'll show you to your room," Samuel said, retrieving her trunk. "You must be exhausted." The interior of the ranch house surprised Josephine. While rustic, it was clean and thoughtfully furnished, a far cry from the crude accommodations she had envisioned. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by comfortable-looking chairs and a solid pine table. "Kitchen's through there," Samuel pointed. "My office is down that hall. Your room is upstairs, first door on the left." The bedroom was small but pleasant, with a narrow bed, washstand, wardrobe, and a window overlooking the mountains. Fresh linens and a pitcher of water awaited her. Mrs. Cooper comes in from town twice a week to help with laundry and deeper cleaning, Samuel explained. She left stew on the stove if you're hungry. Breakfast is at sunrise. Before he could leave, Josephine touched his arm lightly. Mr. Ryder, why did you really tear up that contract? He studied her face for a long moment. My mother was sold to cover my grandfather's debts when she was 16, he said finally. She died never having known true freedom. I swore I'd never stand by and watch another woman suffer the same fate. With that, he bid her good night and closed the door. Alone for the first time in weeks, Josephine sank onto the bed and allowed tears of relief to flow freely. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight she would sleep unbound, her future once again her own to determine. Morning came with the crowing of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle. Josephine woke disoriented before remembering the extraordinary events of the previous day. She dressed quickly in her plainest gown, still far too elaborate for ranch work, and made her way downstairs. Samuel and Walter sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and discussing the day's tasks. Both men stood when she entered. "Hope you slept well," Samuel said, pouring her a cup of coffee. "There's bacon and biscuits keeping warm in the oven." "Thank you," she replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I'd like to begin earning my keep right away. What would you have me do first?" A look of approval crossed Samuel's face. "The kitchen needs organizing. Previous cook left things in a state. After that, the account books could use attention. I'm not much for numbers." Walter chuckled. "That's putting it mildly, boss. Last time you tallied the herd count, we somehow ended up with more cattle coming out than going in." "I'm quite good with figures," Josephine offered. "My father insisted I learn bookkeeping to help with his import business." "Then we're fortunate to have you," Samuel said, rising from the table. "I'll be checking the north pasture today. Walter can show you around the ranch when you're ready." After breakfast, Josephine tackled the kitchen. Years of dust and disorganization yielded to her methodical approach. By midday, she had transformed the space, discovering in the process that Samuel's pantry was well stocked but underutilized. Walter proved to be a patient guide, showing her the layout of the ranch with grandfatherly pride. "Mr. Ryder started with just 20 acres and a dozen cattle," he explained as they walked. "Now we're up to 3,000 acres and 500 head. He works harder than any man I've known." "How did he manage it?" Josephine asked, genuinely curious. "Determination, mostly." "And he's smart, bought land when others thought it worthless, bred better stock than his neighbors. But he's fair, too, treats his hands like family." Walter glanced at her. "Never known him to bring a woman to the ranch before. You must have made quite an impression." Josephine blushed. "He merely took pity on my situation." Walter's weathered face creased in a smile. "Mr. Ryder doesn't do charity, miss. If he brought you here, he saw something worth saving." The days fell into a rhythm. Josephine rose early, prepared breakfast, spent mornings cleaning or cooking, and afternoons working on the ranch accounts. She discovered that Samuel, for all his practical intelligence, had indeed neglected the financial side of his operation. Within a week, she had identified several areas where he was losing money unnecessarily. "You're paying too much for feed," she explained one evening as they sat at the kitchen table, ledgers spread between them. "And the general store in Hill City is overcharging you for supplies compared to what they're charging others." Samuel leaned back in his chair, regarding her with interest. "And how would you know that?" "I compared your receipts with published prices in the territorial newspaper," she replied. "Also, you've been undercharging the Prescott Ranch for your cattle by nearly 15%. He whistled softly. Remind me never to play poker with you, Miss Evans. You notice everything. My father always said a penny saved is a penny earned. She hesitated. Though I'm discovering his financial practices didn't always match his advice. Samuel's expression softened. Don't judge him too harshly. Even good men make mistakes. Mistakes that sold their daughters into servitude. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Your father didn't sell you, Samuel corrected gently. Your uncle did after your father's death. There's a difference. You're right, she admitted. I apologize. It's still difficult to accept how quickly my life changed. Life out here changes in an instant, he said. A blizzard, a drought, a bad decision, anyone can destroy everything you've built. The key is to keep building anyway. His words stayed with Josephine long after they'd finished reviewing the accounts. There was wisdom in them, and resilience qualities she was beginning to admire in this quiet, thoughtful man. As weeks passed, her city clothes proved increasingly impractical. Samuel noticed her struggling with her heavy skirts while hanging laundry and returned from town the next day with several practical dresses, sturdy boots, and even a pair of riding pants. These are hardly proper, Josephine protested when she saw the pants. Proper won't keep you from breaking your neck if you're going to insist on helping Walter exercise the horses, Samuel replied with a hint of amusement. I've noticed you watching him train them. Thought you might like to ride again yourself. She couldn't deny the longing she felt watching the magnificent animals. It's been too long, she admitted. Father sold my mare when his business began failing. There's a gentle bay mare named Penny who could use the exercise, he suggested. She's yours to ride whenever you'd like. The offer touched her deeply. Thank you. The next morning, Josephine donned the riding pants concealed beneath a split skirt for modesty's sake and joined Walter in the corral. Penny proved to be everything Samuel had promised, gentle but spirited, responding eagerly to Josephine's commands. You sit a horse well, miss, Walter observed as she put the mare through her paces. Like you were born to it. It feels wonderful, she admitted, exhilaration coloring her cheeks. I'd forgotten how much I missed this freedom. From the barn doorway, Samuel watched, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd begun noticing things about Josephine Evans, the graceful way she moved, how the Montana sun had brought golden highlights to her chestnut hair, the determination with which she approached every task. Her transformation from frightened captive to confident woman impressed him more than he cared to admit. June gave way to July, bringing scorching days and the arduous work of moving cattle to higher pastures. Josephine insisted on riding along on one such drive, packing provisions and helping to cook for the hungry cowboys. Never thought I'd see the day, Walter commented to Samuel as they watched her efficiently organize the chuck wagon. A Boston lady out working half your hands. She's something else, Samuel agreed, his voice holding a note of admiration that didn't escape Walter's notice. The cattle drive lasted 3 days, with nights spent around campfires under star-filled skies. On the second night, Josephine found herself sitting beside Samuel after the others had turned in, listening as he pointed out constellations. That one's Cygnus the swan, he said, tracing the pattern with his finger. And there's Aquila the eagle. How did you learn all this? She asked, fascinated by this unexpected knowledge. My mother taught me, he replied, his voice softening with memory. She said even when life takes everything else away, the stars remain constant. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. He turned to look at her, firelight reflecting in his eyes. You remind me of her sometimes, that same quiet strength. The compliment warmed her more than the fire. I don't feel very strong most days. That's the thing about strength, he said. Often the people who have it most don't recognize it in themselves. He paused, then added, "You've made a real difference at the ranch, Josephine." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it hung in the air between them. "I'm glad," she replied softly. "It's become important to me, the ranch, the people." She looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "I should get some sleep." "Good night, Mr. Ryder." "Samuel," he corrected. "I think we're past formalities, don't you?" She nodded, a smile touching her lips. "Good night, Samuel." Their return to the ranch coincided with preparations for Hill City's Independence Day celebration. The entire town turned out for the festivities, and Samuel insisted Josephine accompany him and Walter. "You've earned a day of fun," he said when she hesitated. "Besides, it's time the townsfolk met you properly." Hill City had transformed for the occasion, with bunting and flags adorning the buildings. Tables lined the main street, laden with food for the communal feast. A platform had been erected for speeches and, later, dancing. Josephine felt eyes upon her as they rode into town, some curious, others disapproving. Her association with Samuel Ryder had clearly generated gossip. "Ignore them," Samuel murmured, noting her discomfort. "Small minds always talk." The mayor's wife, Mrs. Henderson, approached as they dismounted. "Mr. Ryder," she said with practiced cordiality, "how nice of you to join us." Her gaze slid to Josephine, assessment in every glance. "And this must be your housekeeper." "Miss Josephine Evans," Samuel corrected firmly. "A valued member of my household and my guest today." Josephine extended her hand with the poise her mother had instilled in her. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Henderson. What a lovely celebration you've arranged." Taken aback by Josephine's refined manner, the woman stammered a response before excusing herself. "That was masterfully done," Samuel whispered, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Boston society has its uses," she replied with a small smile, "mainly in handling difficult people graciously." The day progressed pleasantly. Josephine found herself introduced to many of the townspeople, including Mrs. Cooper, the kindly widow who helped at the ranch, and Reverend Thomas, who extended a warm invitation to Sunday services. The awkwardness she had feared never fully materialized. While some women regarded her with suspicion, many were genuinely welcoming. By the time the dancing began after sundown, Josephine felt almost at ease. "May I have this dance, Miss Evans?" Samuel asked as the band struck up a lively tune. She placed her hand in his. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Ryder." He proved to be an accomplished dancer, guiding her confidently through the steps. Josephine found herself enjoying the physical closeness, the strength of his hand at her waist, the faint scent of leather and pine that seemed uniquely his. "You're full of surprises," she remarked as they circled the floor. "First astronomy, now dancing." "A man contains multitudes," he replied with a rare grin that transformed his face. "Though I'll admit, it's been some time since I've had cause to dance." "You haven't forgotten how," she assured him, returning his smile. They danced several more times throughout the evening. During a particularly spirited reel, Josephine caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, the red-bearded Elias Munson, watching her with unmistakable malice. Her step faltered. Samuel noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" "Mr. Munson is here," she whispered, nodding subtly toward the man. "He's watching us." Samuel's expression hardened. "Stay close to me." As the dance ended, Samuel led her toward where Walter stood conversing with several ranch hands. "Keep an eye on her," he instructed before striding purposefully toward Munson. Josephine watched anxiously as the two men engaged in what appeared to be a tense conversation. She couldn't hear their words, but Samuel's stance was rigid, his hand hovering near the pistol at his hip. After several minutes, Munson spat on the ground and stalked away. Samuel returned to Josephine, his face grim. "What happened?" she asked. "Munson hasn't forgotten his $200, Samuel replied. "Claims I cheated him out of property rightfully his." Horror washed over her. "What did you tell him?" "That you're a free woman, not property, and if he comes within 100 yards of you, I'll introduce him to my Colt revolver." His voice was calm but left no doubt of his seriousness. "Let's head back to the ranch. I don't trust him, especially when he's been drinking." The ride home was subdued, the evening's pleasure dampened by the confrontation. Josephine couldn't shake the feeling that her past would continue to haunt her, despite Samuel's intervention. "I'm sorry I've brought trouble to your door," she said as they approached the ranch. Samuel's response was immediate and firm. "You've brought nothing but good to Ryder's Rest, Josephine. Munson is my problem now, not yours." His protectiveness stirred something deep within her, something she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The encounter with Munson cast a shadow over the next few weeks. Samuel insisted Josephine never travel to town alone and arranged for one of the hands to accompany Mrs. Cooper on her bi-weekly visits. He himself took to carrying his revolver even around the ranch, a precaution that underscored the seriousness of the threat. Despite these tensions, life at Ryder's Rest continued its established rhythms. Summer's heat gave way to August storms that renewed the parched landscape. Josephine's responsibilities expanded as she proved her capabilities. She now managed not only the household and accounts, but also supervised the vegetable garden and even helped with the gentler livestock. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching lightning illuminate distant mountains, Samuel broke a comfortable silence. "I received a letter from a cattle buyer in Denver today. He's interested in purchasing a significant portion of our fall herd." "That's wonderful," Josephine replied. "His offer must be good if you're considering it." "It is. Good enough that I'm thinking of expanding the operation." He glanced at her. "I'd value your opinion on the figures." The trust implicit in his request touched her. "Of course, I'd be happy to review them." "There's something else," he continued, his voice taking on an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "The buyer will be in Hill City next month. I'd like you to join me when I meet with him." Josephine looked at him in surprise. "Me? Why?" "Because you understand the business side better than I do," he said simply. "And because your presence tends to civilize negotiations. Men behave better around you." "I doubt that's true," she demurred. "It is. You bring a certain grace to everything, Josephine." His eyes held hers, and she felt her pulse quicken at the intensity she saw there. "The ranch has been different since you arrived." "Better." Before she could respond, a crack of thunder broke the moment, followed immediately by a downpour. They rushed inside, laughing as they shook raindrops from their hair. "I should check the barn," Samuel said. "The new foal doesn't like storms." "I'll put on coffee," Josephine offered. "You'll be soaked through." Later, as they sat by the fire with steaming cups, Josephine found herself studying Samuel's profile. The hard lines of his face had softened in the firelight, revealing the kindness she now knew lay beneath his reserved exterior. In just a few months, this man and this place had become more home to her than Boston had ever been. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. She had come to care deeply for Samuel Ryder, perhaps too deeply for a woman in her position. Samuel seemed to sense her scrutiny. "Penny for your thoughts," she smiled at the coincidental use of his mare's name. "I was just thinking how strange life's paths can be. If you had told me 6 months ago that I'd find happiness on a Montana cattle ranch." "Are you?" he asked quietly. "Happy?" The question demanded honesty. "Yes," she admitted. "Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I am." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability she'd never witnessed before. He set down his coffee cup and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. "Josephine," he began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking a great deal about the future lately. The ranch's future and my own." Her heart began to race. Oh, a man reaches a point where building something for himself isn't enough anymore. He starts thinking about building something to leave behind. His hand found hers, strong fingers entwining with her slender ones. "I find myself wanting more than cattle and land." Josephine scarcely dared breathe. "What do you want, Samuel?" "A partner," he said simply. "Someone to share the good days and weather the bad ones. Someone who sees the world clearly but still finds beauty in it." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Someone like you." The confession hung between them, fragile and momentous. Josephine felt tears prick her eyes. "I came to you as a servant," she whispered. "How can you? You've never been a servant here," he interrupted gently. "From the moment I tore up that contract, you've been your own woman. That's who I've come to admire, the woman who rebuilt herself from nothing, who faces each day with courage and grace." A tear escaped, sliding down her cheek. Samuel reached up to brush it away, his touch achingly tender. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he continued. "Only that you'll think about the possibility of us together." Josephine covered his hand with hers, holding it against her cheek. "I don't need time to think, Samuel. My heart already knows its answer." His eyes searched hers, hope warring with caution. "And what does it say?" "That I've found my home," she whispered. "Not in a place, but in a person, in you." The confession seemed to unlock something in Samuel. He drew her closer, one hand cradling her face as if she were precious beyond measure. When his lips met hers, Josephine felt a sense of rightness so profound it brought fresh tears to her eyes. The kiss was gentle at first, a question and an answer in one. Then, as she responded, it deepened into something more urgent, a promise, a claiming. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly. "I've wanted to do that since the Independence Day dance," Samuel admitted, his forehead resting against hers. Josephine smiled, her heart too full for words. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but within the walls of Ryder's Rest, something beautiful had taken root, something that promised to grow stronger with each passing day. The days that followed held a new sweetness. Small touches, shared smiles, and stolen kisses punctuated their work as summer began its slow transition to fall. Though they kept their changing relationship private, Walter's knowing looks suggested little escaped the old foreman's notice. Their happiness, however, was abruptly threatened in early September. Josephine had ridden to the north pasture to bring Samuel his forgotten lunch when she spotted a group of riders approaching the ranch from the east, 5 men, moving with purpose. She urged Penny to a gallop, cutting across the meadow to reach Samuel, who was mending fences with 2 of his hands. "Riders coming," she called as she approached. 5 of them, heading toward the house. Samuel squinted in the direction she indicated, then his expression darkened. "That's Munson in the lead," he said grimly, "and those aren't social calls he's making." He turned to his ranch hands. "Tom, ride for the sheriff. Tell him we've got trouble at Ryder's Rest. Jake, get back to the house and warn Walter." "What about you?" Jake asked, already mounting his horse. "I'll be right behind you," Samuel assured him. "Go now, fast as you can." As the men departed, Samuel turned to Josephine. "I need you to ride to the Prescott place," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Ask John Prescott for help. He owes me a favor." "I'm not leaving you," Josephine protested. "Not with Munson coming." "This isn't a request," Samuel said firmly. "Munson wants you, and I won't let him near you." He grasped her shoulders. "Please, Josephine, do this for me." The fear in his eyes convinced her. "Be careful," she whispered. leaning forward to press a desperate kiss to his lips before turning Penny toward the neighboring ranch. She rode hard, pushing the mare to her limits. The Prescott Ranch lay 3 miles to the west, an eternity when danger threatened those she loved. By the time she reached the ranch house, Penny was lathered with sweat, and Josephine's hair had come loose from its pins. John Prescott, a burly man with a reputation for fairness, listened gravely to her breathless explanation. "Munson's been looking for trouble for years," he said, already calling for his sons. "We'll ride right away. You stay here with Mrs. Prescott." "No," Josephine insisted. "I'm coming with you." Prescott assessed her determined stance and nodded once. "Your choice, but stay back when we get there." 6 Prescott men rode with Josephine back toward Ryder's Rest. As they crested the final hill, the scene below made her blood run cold. Munson and his men had surrounded the main house. 2 bodies lay motionless in the yard ranch hands she recognized with a jolt of horror. Of Samuel there was no sign. "Looks like we're just in time," Prescott muttered, drawing his rifle. "Boys, spread out. We're going to flank them." "Wait," Josephine urged. "Let me try to see what they want. Maybe I can prevent more bloodshed." "Miss Evans, that's suicide," Prescott objected. "It's me Munson wants," she said quietly. "I can't hide while others die in my place." Before he could stop her, Josephine urged Penny down the hill, approaching the house with her heart in her throat. She halted just within earshot of the standoff. "Munson." She called, her voice remarkably steady despite her terror. "I'm here. Let's talk." All heads turned toward her. Munson's face split in an ugly grin. "Well, well, the Boston lady returns." He gestured with his gun. "Come closer, darling. Your boyfriend's been mighty stubborn about giving you up." "Where is he?" she demanded, scanning the scene for any sign of Samuel. "Inside." Munson jerked his head toward the house. "Took a bullet in the shoulder, but he's alive. For now." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by renewed fear. "What do you want?" "What's rightfully mine," Munson snarled. "You and compensation for my trouble." "I was never yours," Josephine said coldly. "That contract was illegal and immoral." "Tell that to the territorial court," Munson retorted. "They uphold contracts like yours all the time." "Women get sold to cover debts every day out here." "Not this woman," came Samuel's voice as he appeared in the doorway of the house, his left arm hanging uselessly at his side, blood staining his shirt. In his right hand, he held his Colt revolver, aimed steadily at Munson despite his obvious pain. "Samuel," Josephine cried, starting toward him. "Stay back," he ordered, never taking his eyes off Munson. "You're outnumbered, Ryder," Munson said, gesturing to his 3 remaining men, "and wounded to boot. Be reasonable. The woman's not worth dying over." "She's worth everything," Samuel replied evenly. "And you're the one who's outnumbered." On cue, the Prescott men emerged from their positions, rifles trained on Munson's gang. Munson's confidence faltered visibly. "This ain't over, Ryder." "Yes, it is," came another voice as Tom arrived with Sheriff Dawson and 2 deputies. "Drop your weapons, all of you." For a tense moment, Josephine feared Munson would choose to fight. Then, cursing viciously, he threw down his gun. His men reluctantly followed suit. As the sheriff's men disarmed and arrested Munson's gang, Josephine rushed to Samuel's side. He sagged against the doorframe, his face pale with blood loss. "You were supposed to stay away," he murmured as she helped him to a chair. "When have I ever done what I'm supposed to?" She replied, carefully examining his wound. "We need to get you to a doctor." "It went clean through," he said grimly. "I've had worse." The sheriff approached after securing the prisoners. "They'll face murder charges for your hands," he told Samuel soberly, "and attempted murder for shooting you." "Good," Samuel said, wincing as Josephine pressed a cloth to his wound. Make sure the charges stick this time. After the sheriff departed with his prisoners and the Prescott men had helped bury the fallen ranch hands, Josephine insisted on tending Samuel's injury herself. She cleaned and bandaged the wound, her fingers gentle despite her lingering fear. "You could have been killed," she whispered as she worked. "So could you," he countered, catching her hand in his. "What were you thinking, riding up like that?" "That I couldn't bear to lose you," she admitted, tears threatening. "That I'd rather face Munson myself than live in a world without you in it." Samuel's expression softened. He tugged her hand, pulling her closer until she was perched on his lap, careful of his injured shoulder. "I feel the same way," he murmured, brushing her hair back from her face. "When I saw you riding toward danger, Josephine, I've never been more terrified." She rested her forehead against his. "Promise me we won't be separated again." "I promise," he said solemnly. "In fact—" He shifted slightly, reaching into his pocket with his good hand. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He produced a small velvet pouch. From it, he extracted a delicate gold ring with a single perfect pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained softly. "The only thing of value she managed to keep hidden away. She made me promise I'd give it only to a woman of equal strength and grace." His eyes met hers, vulnerable and hopeful. "I can think of no one who embodies those qualities more than you." Josephine's breath caught as she understood the significance of the moment. "Samuel, Josephine Evans," he said formally, "would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Not because of any contract or obligation, but because we choose each other, freely and completely." Tears spilled onto her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." The ring slipped perfectly onto her finger, a symbol not of possession but of partnership, freely given and joyfully accepted. That night, as Samuel rested in his room under Josephine's watchful care, Walter brought news that lifted their spirits further. "Sheriff sent word," the old foreman reported. "Seems Munson had outstanding warrants in 3 territories. He'll hang for sure this time." "Good riddance," Samuel muttered, squeezing Josephine's hand. "We can finally put this behind us." The threat of Elias Munson had cast a long shadow over their happiness. With his capture and the promise of justice for his crimes, that shadow began to recede, allowing hope to flourish in its place. News of their engagement spread quickly through the territory. Most reactions were positive. The Prescotts immediately offered their barn for the wedding celebration, and Reverend Thomas expressed delight at the prospect of performing the ceremony. A few tongues wagged about the unusual circumstances of their meeting, but such gossip held little power against the obvious devotion between them. Samuel's recovery progressed steadily under Josephine's attentive care. By the time autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, he had regained most of the strength in his arm, though a stiffness remained that might never fully disappear. They chose an October wedding date, when the cattle drives would be complete and the ranch's busiest season concluded. Josephine threw herself into preparations with characteristic thoroughness, transforming Ryder's rest for the occasion. The night before their wedding, they sat together on the porch swing, watching stars emerge in the deepening twilight, having second thoughts. Samuel teased as Josephine sighed contentedly against his shoulder. "Only about agreeing to let Mrs. Henderson arrange the flowers," she replied with a smile. "I'm quite certain about marrying you." "Good," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Because I have a wedding gift for you that can't be returned." She looked up at him curiously. "You've already given me so much." From his pocket, Samuel produced a folded document. "This arrived from Boston last week. I've been saving it for tonight." Josephine unfolded the paper with careful fingers. It was a deed to her father's house in Boston. "I don't understand," she whispered, scanning the document. "Father lost everything in his debts." "Not quite everything," Samuel explained. "Your uncle misrepresented the extent of the debts and kept the house for himself. I had a lawyer investigate when you mentioned your childhood home had been your mother's family property for generations." She stared at him in disbelief. "You bought back my family home." "I did. It's yours now to do with as you please. Sell it, keep it as an investment, or—" He hesitated. "If you ever wish to return to Boston society, it's waiting for you." The implication struck her forcefully. "You would let me go, back to Boston." "I would let you choose," he corrected gently. "Every day for the rest of our lives. I never want you to feel trapped, Josephine, not by circumstance, not by a contract, and certainly not by marriage." Tears welled in her eyes as she understood the profound gift he was offering, not just a house, but the freedom to determine her own path, always. "I choose you," she said firmly, pressing the deed back into his hands. "I choose this life, this ranch, this future we're building. Boston was my past, Samuel. You are my present and my future." Relief and love mingled in his expression as he drew her into his arms. Their kiss sealed the promise between them, a promise of partnership, respect, and enduring love. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with just enough autumn crispness to color the bride's cheeks as she prepared in the Prescott's guest room. Mrs. Cooper and Mrs. Prescott helped her dress in a gown of ivory satin, modest by Boston standards but elegant nonetheless, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Cooper said, adjusting Josephine's veil. "Mr. Ryder won't know what hit him." "Speaking of whom, Mrs. Prescott added with a knowing smile, "He's been pacing outside the barn like a caged mountain lion for the past hour. Never seen a man more eager to be married." Josephine's heart swelled at the image. "I'm rather eager myself," she admitted. The Prescott barn had been transformed for the occasion, with autumn flowers and ribbons adorning every surface. Lanterns hung from the rafters, and hay bales covered in quilts provided seating for the guests, a mix of neighboring ranchers, townspeople from Hill City, and the entire staff of Ryder's Rest. As Walter escorted her down the makeshift aisle, Josephine had eyes only for Samuel. He stood tall and handsome in a new black suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. The look of wonder on his face as he saw her approaching was worth every hardship that had brought her to this moment. Reverend Thomas conducted a simple but moving ceremony. When the time came for vows, Samuel surprised Josephine by setting aside the traditional words in favor of his own. "Josephine," he began, his voice steady and clear, "I take you not as my possession but as my partner. I promise to honor your mind, cherish your heart, and respect your spirit. I vow to walk beside you rather than ahead or behind, to listen as often as I speak, and to create with you a home built on trust and mutual respect." He squeezed her hands gently. "I pledge my love, my loyalty, and my life to you, freely and joyfully for all our days." Tears blurred Josephine's vision as she responded with her own promises to stand with him through prosperity and hardship, to build their dreams together, and to love him with unwavering devotion. "By the authority vested in me," Reverend Thomas proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Ryder, you may kiss your bride." Samuel's kiss was tender yet possessive, a perfect balance that reflected the man himself. The gathering erupted in cheers and applause as they turned to face their community as a married couple. The celebration continued well into the night. There was dancing and feasting, speeches and toasts. John Prescott raised his glass to the finest man and most fortunate woman in Montana Territory, while Walter, to everyone's surprise, recited a poem he had composed for the occasion, sentimental verses that brought fresh tears to Josephine's eyes. As the evening waned, Samuel led his bride away from the festivities toward a waiting wagon. "Where are we going?" Josephine asked as he helped her up to the seat. "It's a surprise," he replied with a mysterious smile. "A small wedding gift." They rode for nearly half an hour, following a path that wound through the western edge of Ryder's rest property. Finally, they crested a small hill, and Samuel drew the wagon to a halt. Below them, nestled in a protected valley with a clear view of the mountains, stood a cabin newly built, with a stone chimney and a wide front porch. "Samuel," Josephine breathed. "What is this?" "Our home," he said simply. "If you'll have it," I thought. "We might want a place that's truly ours, not just mine that you moved into." The thoughtfulness of the gesture overwhelmed her. "You built this." "When?" "Started it after you accepted my proposal," he admitted. "The men helped when they could spare time from ranch work." "It's not as grand as the main house. It's perfect," she interrupted, taking in the charming structure with its glowing windows. "Absolutely perfect." He helped her down from the wagon and in one smooth motion swept her into his arms. "Tradition says I should carry you across the threshold," he explained at her startled laugh. "Far be it from me to argue with tradition," she replied, looping her arms around his neck. The interior revealed Samuel's careful planning, simple but beautiful furnishings. A stone fireplace already lit against the autumn chill, and windows positioned to capture both sunrise and sunset views. "The bedroom's through there," he said, setting her gently on her feet. "Kitchen's small but functional, and there's space for an addition if we need it someday." The implication brought a blush to Josephine's cheeks. "Children, if you want them," he said carefully. "I know I'm asking a lot. This life isn't easy." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," she replied, moving into his arms. "And a family with you, Samuel. That would be the greatest adventure of all." Their kiss deepened, passion replacing tenderness as the reality of their new status settled over them. Samuel's hands trembled slightly as they began unfastening the tiny buttons of her wedding gown. "Are you nervous, Mr. Ryder?" she whispered against his lips. "Terrified," he admitted with a soft laugh. "I want this night to be perfect for you." "It already is," she assured him, guiding his hand to her heart. "Because I'm with you." The morning after their wedding dawned with golden light streaming through the cabin windows. Josephine woke wrapped in Samuel's arms, a profound contentment settling over her as she recalled the intimate moments they had shared through the night. "Good morning, Mrs. Ryder," Samuel murmured, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. The her new name filled her with joy. "Good morning, husband," she replied, turning in his embrace to face him. "I could become accustomed to waking like this." "I certainly hope so," he said, drawing her closer. "I intend to wake beside you for at least the next 50 years. Life settled into new rhythms as autumn deepened into winter. The newlyweds divided their time between the main ranch house, where they maintained the business operations, and their private cabin, which became a sanctuary from the demands of running Ryder's Rest. Josephine embraced her role as Samuel's partner in all things. She continued managing the accounts, but also learned the practical aspects of ranching, helping with calving in the spring, gardening through the summer, and preserving food for the winter months. Samuel, in turn, sought her counsel on business decisions and expansion plans, respecting her sharp mind and insightful observations. Their first Christmas as husband and wife brought a special announcement. As they exchanged gifts before the fireplace in their cabin, Josephine saved her most significant news for last. "I have one more present for you," she said, taking Samuel's hand and placing it gently against her still flat stomach, "though it won't arrive until summer." Samuel's expression transformed from confusion to wonder as understanding dawned. "A baby, you're certain?" Dr. Marshall confirmed it yesterday. She nodded, her eyes shining. We're going to have a child, Samuel. The joy that overtook his features was something Josephine knew she would remember all her days. He gathered her carefully into his arms, as if she had suddenly become fragile, and buried his face against her neck. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For this gift. For everything." The news of Josephine's pregnancy spread quickly through the ranch and surrounding community. Mrs. Cooper took it upon herself to ensure the expectant mother ate properly and rested sufficiently, while Walter began crafting a cradle from rich pine wood. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months, though morning sickness plagued Josephine well into February. Samuel hovered protectively, insisting she reduce her workload despite her protests that she wasn't an invalid. "Humor me," he would say when she objected to his fussing. "I've waited my whole life for this family. Let me take care of you both." By spring, Josephine's condition was unmistakable, her slender frame now softly rounded with new life. As her mobility decreased, she focused on tasks she could manage from the comfort of their home, knitting tiny garments, updating the ranch ledgers, and writing a detailed history of Ryder's Rest for their child to read someday. On a warm June evening, as they sat on the cabin porch watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, Josephine felt the first contractions begin. She gripped Samuel's hand wordlessly, and he understood immediately. "I'll fetch Mrs. Cooper and send for the doctor," he said, helping her inside before racing for his horse. The labor lasted through the night and into the following day, long, painful hours that tested Josephine's endurance. Samuel refused to leave her side despite Mrs. Cooper's insistence that childbirth was women's business. "My place is here," he said firmly, supporting Josephine as another contraction seized her. "Unless she asks me to go." "Stay," Josephine managed between pained breaths. "Please." As afternoon sunlight slanted through the bedroom windows, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that spoke of healthy lungs and a strong constitution. Dr. Marshall cleaned and swaddled the infant before placing him in Josephine's trembling arms. "He's perfect," she whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes with wonder. "Look what we made, Samuel." Samuel perched carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around his exhausted wife, the other gently stroking his son's downy head. "He has your chin," he observed, his voice hushed with awe. "And maybe my stubborn eyebrows." They named him Thomas Walter Ryder Thomas for Samuel's father, and Walter for the loyal foreman who had become family to them both. The baby thrived under his parents' devoted care, growing strong on his mother's milk and the pure Montana air. Life with a child brought new challenges and immeasurable joys. Josephine discovered reserves of patience she hadn't known she possessed, while Samuel revealed a playful side that delighted both his wife and son. Little Thomas became the center of their world, a tangible representation of the love that had brought them together against all odds. As Thomas's first birthday approached, Josephine received an unexpected letter from Boston. Her uncle had died, leaving no will and no heirs. As his only living relative, she stood to inherit his considerable estate, an ironic twist given his role in her indentured servitude. "What will you do?" Samuel asked as they discussed the lawyer's letter over dinner. Josephine considered the question thoughtfully. "I think we should sell my father's house and my uncle's properties," she said finally. "Use the proceeds to establish a foundation." "What kind of foundation?" he asked, intrigued by the determination in her voice. "One that provides legal assistance to women trapped in indentured contracts," she explained, warming to her idea. "And education for girls who might otherwise be vulnerable to such arrangements. No woman should ever be sold like cattle again, Samuel." The pride in his eyes matched the passion in hers. "A fitting legacy," he agreed, "and a way to ensure some good comes from your suffering." The foundation became Josephine's special project over the next several years. Working with sympathetic lawyers in Boston and across the Western Territories, she helped draft legislation that would eventually outlaw the type of contract that had brought her to Montana. Meanwhile, Ryder's Rest prospered under their joint stewardship. Samuel's instincts for cattle breeding combined with Josephine's financial acumen created one of the most successful ranches in the territory. They added acreage thoughtfully, improved their breeding stock, and built a reputation for fair dealing that brought buyers from as far away as Chicago. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. When he was 4, a sister joined the family, Elizabeth Cooper Ryder, named for Josephine's mother and the kind woman who had helped bring her into the world. Their family felt complete, their life rich with purpose and love. The cabin that had been their first home expanded to accommodate their growing family, though they maintained the main ranch house for business operations. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Josephine with a trip to San Francisco, their first real vacation since their marriage. They left the children in Mrs. Cooper's capable care and traveled by train to the coast, marveling at the changing landscape and the luxury of uninterrupted time together. In their hotel room overlooking the bay, Samuel presented Josephine with a leather-bound journal. Inside, she found newspaper clippings, official documents, and handwritten notes, a complete record of the legislation she had helped inspire across multiple territories. "The last indentured service contract like yours was voided in Dakota Territory last month," he explained as she turned the pages reverently. "Your foundation made that possible, Josephine. You've changed the law." Tears of gratitude filled her eyes. "We changed it together," she corrected, embracing him tightly. "Everything good in my life has come from that terrible contract that brought me to you." "From the moment I saw you in that auction house," Samuel murmured against her hair, "I knew you were extraordinary. I just never imagined how completely you would transform my life." "When you tore up my contract," she replied, "you didn't just free me from servitude, Samuel. You gave me the chance to become the woman I was always meant to be." Their return to Ryder's Rest coincided with Montana's preparation for statehood, bringing new opportunities and challenges for their expanding operation. As the territory they loved prepared to take its place as the 41st state, Samuel and Josephine embraced the changing landscape with characteristic adaptability. "You ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never met?" Josephine asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard below. Thomas, now 8, was teaching 5-year-old Elizabeth to throw a lasso with patient determination. "No," Samuel replied without hesitation. "Some things are meant to be, Josephine. I believe we would have found each other somehow in some way. Even across the vast distance between Boston and Montana," she teased. "Even then." He took her hand, still delicate but now bearing the calluses of ranch work alongside her pearl ring. "Some souls are destined to meet." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in breathtaking hues of gold and crimson, Josephine reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From a frightened young woman sold through arrangement like cattle, she had become a wife, mother, rancher, and advocate, roles she had embraced with a strength she never knew she possessed until a courageous cowboy bought her contract and tore it up. "I love you, Samuel Ryder," she said softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Today and always." "And I love you, Mrs. Ryder," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple, "more with each passing day." Below them, their children's laughter echoed across the ranch, the sweetest music either could imagine. The legacy they were building together would endure long after them. A thriving ranch, 2 remarkable children, and laws that would protect countless women from the fate Josephine had narrowly escaped. From tragedy had come triumph. From bondage, the purest freedom. Their love story, unlikely as it had seemed that day in the auction house, had become the foundation for a life richer and more meaningful than either could have dreamed possible in the wild, beautiful heart of Montana.